Hi, and welcome back to McClutchy Maths. My name is Natalie McClutchy, and we're continuing our consumer arithmetic series today by looking at simple interest. In this video, we're going to cover 4 key things. Firstly, we're going to look at what interest is and why it's charged. Secondly, I'm going to introduce you to the simple interest formula. We'll do a series of worked examples. And then lastly, we'll look at what's coming up in our future videos. This particular video series is aimed at Year 9 and 10 Maths students. It's part of the Australian curriculum. It's also part of the Year 11 Maths curriculum in Queensland, Western Australia, Tasmania, Victoria, and New South Wales, and South Australia, so very applicable to lots of people. And lastly, if you're a student of business from grade 9 upwards, possibly even at university, and also adults in general, will find this to be a life skill, so it's got a great deal of applicability. Banks in Australia run as businesses. At the time of making this video, there are 64 banks that are Australian owned and operated, and more than 20,000 banks worldwide. Most banks operate to make money, known as making a profit. Banks are not usually run as a charity to be kind or helpful to people. One key way that banks make money is by lending money to individuals and businesses. Loans to buy homes, cars, or holidays, loans to expand businesses or buy shares, and loans via credit cards, just to name a few. And these loans aren't free. Banks charge the individuals and businesses that borrow money a percentage of the amount of money borrowed. This is called interest. In order to lend money out to customers, banks must have a source of money. To give people an incentive to put their money into the bank rather than storing it under their mattress or in a money box, banks pay a bonus amount to those people who store their money at the bank. This bonus amount is a percentage of the amount that has been saved at the bank, and this is also called interest. There are different ways that interest can be calculated. Our focus in this video is on simple interest. In real life, simple interest is often applied to car loans and loans from stores. Simple interest is also applied to special investments such as fixed term deposits and government bonds. These are investments where more interest can be earned by leaving the money untouched with the bank for an agreed period of time. Now that we have an understanding of how the banking industry works, we're now going to talk about the simple interest formula. We're going to look at how to actually calculate simple interest. And here's the formula here. I equals PIN. You may see it in other textbooks as PRT. Doesn't really matter as long as you know how to use it. And I'm going to show you now what these different variables in this formula mean. Firstly, we have capital I, which is the subject of our equation. Is the total amount of interest that is charged if you've got a loan or earned if you have an investment in dollars. Capital P is the principal. Now that's not the person who's in charge of your school. This is the amount of money that's invested or borrowed at the beginning, principal meaning beginning. The little I that's in the middle of that second part of the equation is our interest rate, and it's really important that you understand that this is the interest rate given as a decimal, and we'll talk a little bit later about how to calculate that. And lastly, we have N. This is the length of time of the loan or the investment, and this is also another important distinction. That's why I've got it in red. It's always calculated in years. So very important that you understand I is a decimal, N is in years. Let's look at some worked examples. With worked example 1, we have Jenna who has borrowed $20,000 to buy a car. The loan was for 5 years and the rate from AmBank was 3% per annum. We're going to calculate the amount of interest that she paid in total. So firstly, we've got some new vocabulary, the words per annum. What this means in our question is for every year, per being for every, and annum is the word for year. We've seen that in the word annual before. Our first step, as usual, when we're working with formulas, is to write the formula down. And we got that from our previous slide, I equals PIN. Our second step, and this is an important step that a lot of students often skip and then they make mistakes. We're going to state our variables. It's a good idea to list them, particularly because we have a worded problem. We want to make sure that we're using C plan, do check, and unpacking all the different parts of this question. So firstly, we've been given the principal, that's $20,000. That's the amount that Jenna borrowed at the very beginning. Our interest rate was 3%. That was given to us as a percentage, and it's always important when you're using simple interest that you use the annual rate here. Now we're going to change this into a decimal number so that we can use that in our formula. So we take the 3, that's 3%, which means 3 out of 100. So we divide that by 100, and on our calculator that will give us 0.03. That's the number that we're going to use for interest. And lastly, Our period of time for our loan is 5 years, so n is equal to 5. So now that we've stated all our variables, it becomes very simple to complete the question. Step 3, we're simply going to substitute all of those variables into the formula. I is going to be equal to 20,000 times 0.03 times 5. Why don't you do it on your calculator now and see if you get the same answer as me? We're going to evaluate that on our calculator, and I will be $3,000. Always important to state your final answer using a dollar sign for currency because we're calculating things with money. And lastly, we're going to write a statement because the question didn't say calculate I, it said calculate the amount of interest. So our final answer should always be a statement. Jenna paid $3,000 in interest in total. So that was our first worked example. Fairly easy, huh? Let's do something slightly a little bit more tricky. Worked example 2, we have Tate, and Tate's one of my students. Shout out to Tate. He borrowed $50,000 to buy furniture. The loan was for 27 months and the rate from the store was 6.92% per annum. Calculate the amount of interest that he paid in total. So once again, we're going to write our formula, and step 2 is to state the variable. Now that's fairly straightforward. We've got the principal, that's 50,000. We've got our interest rate. Let's change that straight away into a decimal number by dividing it by 100, 0.0692. Now, our amount of time for the loan has been given to us as 27 months. Remember I said earlier that n is always in years, so we have to change the months to a period in years. So we're going to divide that by 12 because there's 12 months in 1 year, and we get 2.25 years. It's 2.25 years. So now we're ready to substitute that information into the formula and evaluate it on a calculator. So we've substituted that in. I is equal to $7,785. So that's how much interest he paid in total. Wasn't very smart, Tate. You should have saved up the money instead of borrowing it. Lastly, we're going to write a statement. Tate paid $7,785 interest in total. He could have bought a lot of extra furniture with that money. Let's do another worked example. In this case, I have Lily who wants to go on a $10,000 holiday. She invests $6,500 in a term deposit. So this time we're not borrowing money from the bank. This time we're putting our money into the bank and the bank's going to pay us some interest. So she's put it in the term deposit for 2 years, which means that she leaves it there for 2 years and doesn't touch it. And they're going to give her a return of 8% per annum. Will this term deposit provide enough interest to enable Lily to go on her holiday? Well, let's hope so. So firstly, we've got some more new vocabulary here. We've got the word return in the question, and all that means is it's the profit from her investment. In other words, that's the interest that she's going to earn. So step 1, let's write that formula down again. Yes, it gets very tedious. It's very procedural and process driven. Step 2, let's state our variables again. We have the principal, $6,500. That's the amount that she invested. We've got the interest rate as a decimal this time, and our length of term for the deposit, that's 2 years. Now we simply substitute that information into the formula, evaluate it on our calculator, and we find that Lily has earned interest of $1,040. Now, the question didn't ask us how much interest did she earn. It asked us, will she be able to go on her holiday? So what we need to do here is calculate the amount that Lily has at the end of her investment. It's not just the interest, it's also the money that she invested, the $6,500. So we have a new formula here. It's A equals P plus I. Now you might be wondering, what is A? Well, A is the amount at the end of a loan or an investment. It includes the principal that you started with, and then added to that is the interest. Now obviously if you were lending money to the bank by depositing it in the bank in a savings account, it's going to be what you saved to start with plus the interest the bank has paid you. However, if you've got a loan, then A will be the principal, the amount that you borrowed at the start, plus all of the interest you have to pay back. So we've got A. We're going to work out A now. So that's $6,500 plus $1,040, and the amount that she has at the end after this investment is $7,540. It's not enough for her to go on her holiday, unfortunately, so we need to write a statement and answer the question. Lily will not have enough for her holiday. It would be even better if you could evaluate how much her shortfall is, how much she's going to be missing out, $2,460. We're going to do some slightly more difficult worked examples now. In this case, I have JC, that's another one of my students, shout out to JC, who bought some government bonds and earned $18,000 in interest. The rate he earned was 4.25% per annum, and the bonds were invested for 15 years. How much money did JC invest? So you can see in this case, we're missing some key information. Let's have a look by writing our formula firstly and stating what the variables are that are given to us in the question. So firstly, we know how much interest was earned. In our previous 3 questions, we had to calculate the interest, but this time that's been done for us. Secondly, we've got our interest rate. We've changed that into a decimal. And we've got the term of the investment, 15 years. And what's missing is our principal. That's the amount that JC invested at the beginning. Normally we've given the principal, but this time we've got a variable missing, so we need to calculate that information. So let's substitute it into our formula. Now you can see we've got an algebraic expression, 18,000 equals P times 0.0425 times 15. So we need to get P all by itself in order to be able to solve this problem. So what we're going to do is something called transposing the formula. Now, if you've never heard of the word transpose before, all that means is we're going to rearrange the equation and make P the subject. That means P will be all by itself. So to do that, at the moment, P is multiplied by 0.0425 and it's multiplied by 15. To reverse the multiplication and get P alone, we're going to divide both sides of the equation by 0.0425 times 15. You can see I've done that there on the screen. And if I put that into my calculator, I'm going to find that P, the principal, is $28,235.29. Now there may be more decimal places than that. It's always important to round money to 2 decimal places. Lastly, we're going to write a statement because the question didn't ask us to find P, it asked us how much money did JC invest. So he invested $28,235.29 in the government bonds. Write a sentence. And now we're on to our final example today. Emily and George want to invest $250,000 in bonds for 7 years. They want to have $300,000 at the end of the period. What interest rate will they need to achieve their goal? So once again, we've got a question like this where we're not being asked to find the interest. We're being asked to find something else. So firstly, let's write our formula. I equals PIN and state our variables. You'll notice this gets quite repetitive because we follow the same process every single time. P equals 250,000. That's the amount they wanted to invest at the beginning. A is the amount that they have at the end, 300,000. And N is equal to 7, the 7 years. And we don't know what I is. That's what we need to find. Now, if we look at our formula, I equals PIN. Well, we don't have I. We need the big capital I. We need to find this variable here first before we can start evaluating to find the little I. So firstly, we need to remember A equals P plus I. So therefore, the capital I, the amount of interest that they earned in dollars, is going to be equal to the amount at the end, take away the amount at the beginning. So let's do that little calculation there. 300,000 take away 250,000 gives us $50,000. So now we have everything that we need to find the little I, the interest rate. So let's substitute what we have into the formula. Once again, we've got a situation that we're going to have to transpose the equation to get I to be the subject all by itself. So we do what we did in our previous worked example. We're going to take 50,000 and divide it by 250,000 by 7, and that's going to give us I on a calculator of 0.02857. Now remember, when we use the formula I equals PIN, we're using I as a decimal. However, an interest rate is usually presented as a percentage. So to finalize our answer, we need to convert this little I back into a percentage. So we're going to change it from a decimal to a percentage by multiplying it by 100, and that gives us 2.857%. Sometimes in your question, you might be asked to round that to 2 decimal places, so do be careful with your rounding there. And the last step, write that statement. Emily and George will need to find a rate of 2.857% per annum in order to be able to get the return on their investment that they need. Well, let's have a quick look at what's coming up in some of our previous videos. We're going to look at wages and salaries for our Year 11 maths and business students and adults. We've got budgets, markups and discounts, profit and loss, GST, exchange rates and dividends. So lots of this stuff is going to be perfect if you are in Year 11 maths, and if you're a business student, some of it if you're an adult just wanting to know how to do some of these different financial calculations. I'd like to do a quick shout out to our new subscribers. Thank you so much for joining us here on the channel. And why not follow McClutchy Maths on Facebook? Like and subscribe and hit that notifications button so you'll know when all of those new videos are coming along. And I'd like to just shout out as well to the credits and sources. Thanks so much, Slides Go, and to the AU Finance website for the information on this video. Thank you so much again for joining me. It's a real pleasure to have you here at McClutchie Maths. I'm Natalie McClutchie. Have a wonderful day.